They're big, they're ugly, and they're coming to get us. It's the invasion of the monster king crab.
Reports are coming in from fishermen all along the coast.
What are these things? Some unknown species of crabs.
I've never seen a 6-foot-tall crab. We need to call
Secret Society of Fly Tires.
And tell them what? That we're being attacked by man-eating crabs?
We have to stop them.
So these perfectly adapted
Fly patterns.
are now supercharged.
And what can stop something so jacked up?
Another perfectly evolved
Fly to help you catch fish in the salt water, you fool.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Secret Society of Fly Tires. You know, you'd be surprised how tough it is to come up with content for 4 episodes of a fly tying podcast. I'm still figuring out where to take this whole idea, and it will evolve, I'm sure. But trying to think of fly tying content that people besides yourself might enjoy can be a real brain melter, especially when you're just slightly above beginner level yourself and have a hard time thinking about anything except tying winter steelhead flies no matter what time of year it is. It's a little weird, I guess, since I grew up near the beach and love warm weather, swimming, barbecuing, and everything else that goes along with the summer in California. But steelhead sickness is real. On the other side, I've had many conversations with my buddy Kyle about how if we had to choose, we'd both pick fishing the saltwater on a regular basis over our home water being the river if we had to fish one more than the other. Don't get me wrong, it's hard to think of places more magical than foggy coastal rainforests in the Pacific Northwest. I'd be thigh-deep in almost any river that holds a steelhead right now if I could teleport to one without my family noticing, like some sort of hybrid alien steelhead abduction missing time scenario.
And ended up in a missing time that was over 4.5 hours. I was brought back, and there was a manhunt that ensued, and a lot of people in the area saw these things.
I really don't even fish the saltwater very often, as I'm based in Sacramento, but the ocean calls. I love it more every time I go. In today's episode, we're going to focus on the many types of crab patterns used while surf fishing, and WES McNEW from Onion Creek Fly Company was chosen as our expert for this episode. I'll share the conversation we had after I ramble for a little bit. Thinking about it more, my friend Kyle might be basing his decision between fishing the ocean and the river more on the fact that I took him steelhead fishing not long after I met him and almost killed him.
And you almost killed me! Of course I'm mad at you!
To make a long story short, we were at a fairly popular spot on the Lower American River in the wintertime about 10 years ago. I was pretty new to wading and felt invincible since I hadn't experienced any close calls yet, and this was Kyle's first time. We strapped him into some old boot-bottom rubber waders and got to the river before sunup. Once we made it down to our spot, we spied an island with a channel on the far side that looked fishy. The grass is always greener, so I asked Kyle if he wanted to cross over with me, and he agreed. He was in front and started the slow crossover through what looked like waist-deep water that was moving pretty quick. I realized I left my backpack on the shore and told him I was turning around to get it. As soon as I turned, his legs got swept out from under him and he was getting taken downriver. He was sinking fast, and soon all I could see was my buddy's face sticking out of the water as he was trying his best to stay calm as he bobbed down the river. The cold river was now too deep for him to touch bottom. He dropped the rod and reel I let him borrow, and his knife, trying to get out of his waders, and was at the mercy of the current. I ran to shore looking for rope or a tree limb or anything to toss out to him, but there wasn't anything around, and he was basically out of reach now. Luckily, there were 2 other anglers downstream who saw what was happening and knew the river better than we did. They hollered for him to try and swim towards an area that shallowed up where he could climb out. Thankfully, he floated in that direction and his filled up rubber waders, and they helped him out safely from a really scary situation. I breathed a big sigh of relief and made the trek to my car to go pick him up downriver. When I found him, we both had a pretty good laugh about it all and obviously learned from it. He was looking like some kind of horrible version of a soaked male stripper wearing only his waders as everything else he had on was cold and wet. And you know, honestly, I don't think Kyle has agreed to fish the river with me since. He will go to the ocean with me though. If he had gotten swept away by a rogue wave instead, at least we could say he died doing what he loved, taken by the unmatchable power of Poseidon. Like a true sailor. No grave but the sea. I'm sorry I almost killed you, Kyle.
I'm sorry!
It was reported on NothingButTheFacts.com that striper eat 10 million sand crabs every day.
Yeah, right, dude.
That source hasn't been vetted yet, but the URL checks out. That number doesn't really matter anyway. Crab patterns work, and there are tons of different types for different species, locations, and scenarios. They work because fish all worship and fear the Greek crab hero Carcanus, who came to the aid of Hydra in its battle with Hercules at Lerna.
What?
No, they don't. They work because fish love to eat crabs, and people like WES McNEW have figured out ways to tie them that fool even the pickiest permit on the flat. They can be a little intimidating to tie after watching someone on YouTube break out their markers, shave down all kinds of foams, and use different ways and materials to craft pinchers, or put multiple sets of dumbbell eyes on them in spots you might not typically tie them in. But like any other pattern, they're only as complicated as you make them. Sand crab patterns can basically be tied like large nymphs and will work just fine in the surf for a number of species. I'm not sure when the first crab pattern was tied or by who, but it was most likely in the late 1920s when fly anglers first started to target bonefish. If you know who might have done it, let me know by emailing me a scathing rant about my lack of knowledge or a mean comment about me being a lazy conspiracy theorist. Or just be nice. I'm doing my best, alright? I didn't even try to make an STD joke, and this whole episode's about crabs.
Statistics show that somebody in here had or has something. Y'all are liars, man. Be real out here, man.
So you want to catch your first bonefish, permit, redfish, striper, surf perch? Get yourself the right materials, find your way to the saltwater, and learn a crab pattern or two. Climb out of your comfort zone and try something new. If I had one more line, I'd be rapping to you. Or hit up Wes at Onion Creek Flies for some of their many different crab choices, including the tarantula crab, camel crab, flexo crab, or Casablanca. Wes sharpened his dexterity all over the open road as a guitar tech for touring bands before starting up Onion Creek Fly Company, and I'm eager to learn more about him. I hope you enjoyed the chat we had about fly tying, crabs, and more.
Wes, thank you for being here today. And I have some questions that I'm going to get to about crabs, crab patterns. I've seen a lot of your patterns on your website, Onion Creek Flies. I want to get to that. I had some kind of just general initial questions I wanted to get to first. I've done a little homework after seeing your flies online. I see you spent time on the road as a guitar tech, right?
I was on the road for probably 15, 20 years, somewhere in there. Yeah.
Right on. And you're a production manager now?
I am.
Right on. And you say you're in San Antonio. What venue are you working at there?
I work at Floors Country Store. It's actually in Helotes, which is a little kind of rural suburb, northwest San Antonio area. Been there for 80 or 85 years. Historical marker status. Like Willie Nelson used to play there every Saturday sort of deal back in the day. So yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. I was going to ask you what groups you toured with when you were on the road.
When I was touring, man, I did I probably kind of the later in my career, like the last tour I did in 2017, I was with Lyle Lovett and his large band.
Sweet.
I for Lyle. Before that, I was with a band called Need to Breathe for 4 or 5 years. They were Charleston based. I think they're in Nashville now.
Nice. Yeah. I thought I saw one time online, I thought on your Instagram, I thought maybe I could be remembering this wrong, but I thought you were like tying flies side stage and Charlie Crockett was maybe sound checking or something like that.
Yeah, that was at Floors.
That's rad.
So,
man. Yeah.
Yeah. I take all my stuff with me when I go, just because, it's as production manager, if everybody is doing their job, there's not much for me to do. So, and we try to keep people around that know how to do their job.
Right on. So how did you start the Onion Creek Fly Company?
Man, I like I said, I toured for years. I fished conventional growing up as a kid. I grew up west of Waco on a dairy farm, and I found out real fast that what I didn't want to do for the rest of my life. So I moved to Colorado for a little bit when I was like 18 and 19. I was in Colorado and Wyoming for a little bit, and when I was doing that, I picked up fly fishing from I was working at some adventure camps. So from some of the other guides there, I picked up one of their fly rods, and they kind of taught me how to cast, and I started just kind of going off and fishing. And then I moved back home, moved to Austin, I think probably when I was around 21, 22. And I didn't really wasn't doing much outdoors then. I was kind of focused on trying to figure out what I was going to do for work and all that stuff. And that kind of led me to the music business and attended a bar for a while and that kind of deal. And then fast forward, being on the road for several years, my wife and I got pregnant, and we lost our son full-term pregnancy. Just stillborn was kind of the only answer we got for that. And just kind of as I was figuring out how to grieve that and deal with that, I kind of was drawn back outside and just was making that connection that way. And I got a fly rod again and just started kind of taking myself out to some places that were, pretty easy to access, and kind of relearning that. And I wasn't really getting the results that I wanted from that. And it ended up just frustrating me even more at times. And so I actually called All Water Guides. It's based in Austin. That's Alvin and Lene Dideau's outfit. And went fishing with a cat named Winston, who was guiding for them at the time. And it just kind of started clicking there, and did that. And I was still on the road at the time. So I go back out on tour. I come back. My wife and I, end up pregnant again, and we have a little girl.
Awesome.
Yeah. And so I kind of came off the road when she was born, and I was kind of the primary caretaker because my wife's job is way more lucrative than my touring was. Not that it's a bad gig at all, but if one of us had to do it, it was definitely, made more sense for me to stay home and get to be with the family and not have to be traveling so long. And Lorraine, or my daughter, she would sleep sometimes 5 hours a day with naps and stuff, and I just needed something to do. So I went on my first saltwater trip, and I saw just going chasing redfish on the coast, and I just kind of saw what the guide gave me, was the flies that I was using. I was like, man, this looks like something that I could probably figure out how to do. So when I got home from that, I went just to Cabela's and bought the whatever cheapest vise I could find, and immediately took that home. I immediately took that back because it wasn't I couldn't even get it to hold a hook or anything. So and then from there, I just basically kind of taught myself via YouTube, and everybody, there's so much great information that designers and tires that have been doing it for so much longer that have been gracious enough to share. That's just kind of how I taught myself how to do it. And just after the repetitiveness of it and getting it down, like I struggled really bad with like figuring out proportions and all that kind of stuff. And I finally just figured out like, okay, cool. Well, I'm going to look at his vise and see where the tail hits on his vise. And I just kind of start figuring it out that way. And
all those little details that you kind of brush off at first, huh?
Yeah. And that was the thing. Like I jumped in so quick to it that like I didn't take the time to learn thread control or any of these things that I'm just like, oh, that's silly. It's all going to be covered up anyway.
Right. Yeah. It sounds like how I learned too. I mean, basically just like being curious enough to finally go get some stuff, and then just we're lucky to have YouTube. I've talked to plenty of people that obviously learned before that, and it we have a big advantage there.
Yeah, absolutely. Those guys, God bless them, that kind of pays that way. And now that there's guys like me that are knocking their patterns off and that sort of deal, because by no means am I any kind of a designer. I believe design is kind of ultimately should be to solve a problem, and I haven't found anything that somebody hasn't covered.
Yeah, well, speaking of that, like I really like your coyote clousers, which obviously you didn't create the clouser, but the little variation on that is super cool, and I dig them a lot.
Yeah, man. I like to use coyote a lot.
It's cool. So, I mean, how long were you tying then before you actually just decided I'm going to open up shop and start selling my stuff?
I tied for like probably, I don't know. I mean, 3 or 4 months, and already like, the Winston who I'd mentioned that was guiding for Alvin was just like, hey, those look great. Tie me some.
Oh yeah.
So it kind of started with just, folks would,
Yeah,
see
there's
him on Instagram, and
there's some confidence building right there too. As soon as somebody wants some. Yeah.
yeah,
for sure.
absolutely.
Yeah.
But it also like made me realize that, okay, if I'm going to put this out there and sell it, then I need to put some more time in and figure out how to make this durable, make sure that it's going to swim right.
Yeah.
Because, watching it on YouTube, sometimes you're not going to get the small nuances that make it do what it's supposed to.
Yeah. And if you could fish them yourself a lot too.
Yeah. And I
figure
live
those things
right
out.
on Onion Creek is actually in my backyard.
Yeah. Cool.
So I just take them out there, and there's a dam right in my backyard. So I got a pretty deep pool where I could actually swim flies in and, see how they sunk and do all that kind of stuff. So
Way cool, man. Yeah. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I read online that you specialize in flies for the Yucatan area, right?
man, that's kind of what it's turned out to be. Like I've fished in Mexico probably 4 or 5 times now, and maybe 3. It's hard to keep track. But man, it's so accessible and easy to get there that it just for me going, if I want to chase permit or smaller tarpon or bonefish, it just makes the most sense. And unfortunately it's cheaper to go spend a week in Mexico to go permit fishing than it would be, say, Florida.
For sure. Right. I got to do it. I haven't had a chance yet.
Yeah. I just actually tied some stuff for some folks from, can't remember where they're at. I think they're maybe more Bay area that just went, and yeah, they had a great time.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, your catalog's full of great stuff on your website. What would you say your hottest selling pattern is? Like, what do you sell the most of?
Man, I sell tons of that little raghead crab.
Yeah.
Which is, it's a mass produced crab, but nobody produces it heavy enough or with the yellow eyes. And for some reason, the guides down in Mexico, that's like, oh, it's gotta have yellow eyes.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah. And whether that makes a difference to a permit or not, or if it just gives that guide that confidence that that's what it is, whatever. But like, I actually sell those to 2 shops too. So Tailwaters in Dallas, because they also have a travel company and run a lot of trips down there. So I keep all of their clients stocked in those. And then there's another shop up in Washington. Oh man, I'm drawing a blank on the name of it, but yeah, I send as fast as I can, as many of I send them like probably each 10 dozen every other month or something right now.
That's cool. Yeah. Speaking of, I read an interview with you where you said somebody asked you what your favorite fly was, and your answer was whatever's tied on.
Yeah.
And as a passionate steelheader, I love that answer. A lot of the time that's all it really comes into play. And what do you think? Why do you think positive intention and confidence like that is so important?
Man, I think that, a fish like steel, I have never fished for steelhead, so it's still a myth to me, but fish like steelhead and permit, like you got to find something and hold on to that. Otherwise you'll drive yourself mad.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
So if it's yellow eyes, or if it's, pink, or if it's just, the fact that, okay, whatever is in I'll tie it on to the end of I know this should catch a fish.
Mm-hmm.
It does, it looks the way it should, but I just think, there's in the back of your head, you got to hold on to, okay, this is going to happen.
Yeah. I try to approach the water. I try to approach the water with that, before I'm even fishing.
Yeah.
Usually it's hard. It's something that's kind of, you have to think about doing that. At least I do. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, put some of that mindset too. Like, I feel like, redfish at I'm not going to say that they're always easy to catch and that they'll always eat anything, but I've found that, you know, I could keep a clouser tied onto a rod for as long as it'll stay there and it'll get eat.
Yeah. So you said you sell a lot of those, what was the raghead crab?
Yeah. That and spawning shrimp, coyote shrimp.
So some stuff is, I'm sure, is like kind of a chore. You know, you get a big order of X, you know, or whatever. Like, what do you like tying? Like, when you get a big order of something, you're like, what are you pumped about?
Man, I like different stuff. Like a couple years ago, Alvin and JT were going on JT Van Zant, who guides down the Texas coast, were going to the Seychelles on it with Yeti. They were taking a big trip, and so they both hit me up to tie on some flies for the Seychelles. Well, I've never been to the Seychelles. I may never, because that's I don't even know if I could handle that travel.
Right. Yeah.
To be honest with you.
Yeah.
But you know, a different kind of challenge, and just having to go do the research and ask people. And you know, I'm lucky that I've gotten to make good friends with some of these folks, like Jocko, and who guided in the Seychelles, is now down on the Texas coast guiding. So that was a great resource for me to kind of pick his brain. And I mean, I try not to bug a lot of these people that or feel like I bug them, who've created some of these patterns, but every once in a while I'll reach out, just because I feel like they've already given so much by putting stuff out there on the internet anyway. It's like, what else can I expect from them? You know, like, I don't want to. So I try to always do my best to research it. And then if I still have something that I'm not finding or grasping, I'll do my best to graciously reach out to figure out the answers that I'm looking for.
Yeah. I mean, so tying for a living, you know, tying as your commercially, how do you keep from getting burnt out on, you know, on tying? Like, I'm not sure how much you put in daily, weekly, but like, I always hear that it has the danger of that, you know?
Yeah. I mean, fishing helps keep me inspired. Good feedback from clients helps keeps me inspired. Things that I can production tie, which, you know, would mean like for instance, like when I tie those crabs, like I'll just dress my hooks, and put my lead eyes on,
kind of stage them out like that.
Yep. Yeah. And then I'll, you know, take this, and I'll you know, divvy all my hackle out on it. And so I do stuff in such, you know, in that process, to where I'm not just sitting there doing one at a time and making myself want to beat my head against the wall.
Right. Totally.
Like,
so you're on the pro team for Norvise, right?
I am.
Yeah. How did that relationship start?
Man, the first shop that I started tying for, when I first started, I started tying for like I tied for a lot of shops quickly, because I was tying. I tie a lot of game changers too, and was tying a lot of them at that time. And it was before the Flyman had come out with Blaine's signature series. So the only game changer you could buy, you know, over the counter, was this thing that Umpqua put out, and it was like, I mean, you got it wet, and it was like casting a sock.
Yeah, just sogged up. Yeah.
I mean, and you know, I don't even think Blaine liked it, like, and even wanted to have his name on it.
Oh, wow.
But I think as that, you know, kind of developed, and so I was cranking out a bunch of those for shops in Texas, and I couldn't keep up. But the Norvise relationship came from Sportsman's Finest. The manager at the time, his name was Greg Wielander, and he had me start tying these basically little mini clousers for white bass. It was kind of like their staple white bass fly. So I did all those for him. And then he also bought game changers from me, and that kind of started. And then it was like, oh, the Orvis store in Austin, the Orvis store in San Antonio. So that kind of came on. Well, fast forward, Greg ends up leaving Sportsman's. I think it sold a new ownership, and he was ready to do something else. And so he started being the rep for, I think he's got like Thomas and Thomas, Siegler Reels. Norvise is one of his clients that he rep. I saw that, and I was always kind of intrigued by buy the Norvise just for production reasons, mainly because like the bearings in this thing are crazy. So like even just putting my lashing my eyes on and putting a thread base on my hook was super quick.
Wow, yeah.
Because they have their own bobbin too, which is an automatic bobbin, and it retracts. So like,
wow, okay, that's
you don't have
cool.
to like it's literally, you know, you put it on the hook, spin, and
people can't see this because I'm just posting audio, but this is you're giving a demonstration of the Norvise system here. That is, I haven't seen somebody you know, face to face showing me these things. I've just kind of seen some stuff online, you know.
Yeah, and I didn't know much about them, but I was always intrigued by it. And it you know, if I'm being honest, I was like, man, is it kind of gimmicky? Is it not gimmicky? Is it good?
Yeah, my feeling was like I'm kind of just past the beginners phase, you know, and starting to connect a lot of dots and learning stuff every day, right? And the Norvise system looks different enough to be a little bit intimidating.
Yeah.
What do you say is the biggest advantage?
And I would say honestly, the fact that for production tying, like just how fast I can get a thread base on a hook and stuff lashed down. There's just some other really cool stuff too. The way it's set up, like it has you have to mount it to a base. And there's the vise on your left side, and then it has a post that would be on your right side. Well, that post you can also like hang your bobbin on. So let's say I've got a hook in here and I want to do, I don't know, let's say I want to make a dubbing loop. So I make that dubbing loop, and then I would pull this over and hang that there. And then I can just literally just spin it on.
Yeah. Wow. So is it a total change in platform? Like, do you need new thread spools and stuff like that? That's the auto bobbin, right?
Yeah. So basically you spool these with normal thread. It comes with like a little chuck that you'd put on a drill.
Okay.
And you can slide the little spool on.
Okay.
And then I'll put the normal spool in a regular bobbin, and I'll just thread it on there.
Cool.
And it takes a little bit of time, but it's not, to me, it's worth it. It all makes up for it. And
it's already stoking my interest even more than it ever has. So
yeah. And two, I would say that the Norvise has probably, let's see, has 4 different jaw configurations.
Okay, you're right. Shanks and
Yep. It's got a shank jaw that I can tie my game changers on.
Cool.
This would be the standard jaw, and this is, I can put I don't know, probably up to a 2-aught in it, maybe. Cool. And then they've got a big game jaw that I could put up to 6-aught in.
Yeah, are all the jaws like straight like that on the end?
No, they've got one that's kind of like a more curved, like normal. It's called the fine point jaw. So, it gives you more access to, the bend of the hook and stuff like that. But that fine point jaw, don't let it fool you. You can get it to hold like a 6-aught.
Yeah, that's super cool.
I don't think Norvise likes folks saying that. But if you do it right, it works just fine.
Right on. Those are cool. Let's talk about crabs. So can you run through your crab patterns? And there was quite a few that you have, and what their like intended uses are.
Yeah, man, fishing crabs can sometimes be weird. I still sometimes have a hard time grasping it. It's a little bit easier for redfish when you're fishing super shallow and you can see everything that's happening. But a lot of times when you're fishing permit, you're fishing sometimes 3 or 4 foot of water. So just really, knowing that it's a crab. I'm going to need to take this instead of like if I was fishing a shrimp where I'd be short strip, bumping it. With a crab, I'm fishing long and slow,
more methodical.
And just kind of. And I'm not going to sit here and act like I know how a crab acts when it's swimming, but that seems to be what the ticket is on them. I would say that a lot of times that fishing crabs, you want to fish them closer to the bottom. That's where I typically have seen them. So making sure that they get down. Crabs are normally pretty heavy. So they're not always as fun to try to huck, but
Yeah.
they
So
got
let's-
their time and place.
So you have the raghead crab. Can you name a couple of the other ones that you have on your catalog?
Probably have like a turnip crab, and then which is kind of a Belize pattern. It's really small, typically meant to fish shallow water. And then what else do I have on there? Feel like it's another, like a bigger version of that turnip crab. I'm gonna have to go to my own website here. Let's see. I tie a lot of flexos too, which is kind of basically, a derivative of the Alflexo that was kind of developed for the Seychelles. And so I do a lot of those. The pictures on here are so bad and outdated. I hate looking at my website sometimes, but that's just the way it goes. I don't have time to do that as well. The camo crab is another Belize pattern. I think that's CC that does it, but it's another just it kind of looks like a crab that's molting, that does well for permit and bonefish in Belize. And then there's tarantula crab, which is an EP pattern that, man, I've fished everything from permit to redfish. I've even thrown it in freshwater and have caught bass and
yeah, that one looks like a Yeti crab almost.
Yeah.
It you mentioned the weight. What do you think? What do you think's most important with a crab fly? Is it weight, profiles, color, size?
Yeah, I mean, I think the weight has, making sure it keels right. So making sure that it turns over and rides how you want it. I want most of mine to ride hook up, hook point up.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like putting weed guards on flies. I will, but I don't know. Just something in my head doesn't compute with, oh yeah, let's block the point of the hook.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, do you think it's tougher to kind of match the hatch or whatever you'd say for a saltwater fly, like a crab? I see, people go to great lengths.
Yeah, they do, and there's realistic and then there's suggestive.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that I try to lean more to the suggestive, trying to knock out some of these realistic ones. Like there's a guy, I'm not sure where he's at, but his handle on Instagram is like Streamer Art Designs, and he does all of these 3D printed crab bodies and legs and like super realistic stuff. Yeah. It's super cool, but for me, who's trying to produce, hundreds of them, it's not super conducive to getting those out in a timely manner.
Yeah. Mentioning that you sell a lot of the raghead crab, is that what you fish the most yourself out of those two?
It just depends. If in Mexico for permit or even Belize for permit, yes, I throw those a lot. I would say that in Mexico, your guides are going to look for three patterns, and it's going to be an EP spawning shrimp in white or tan with yellow eyes, a squimp, yellow eyes, and then that raghead in tan or white with yellow eyes. And if you've got those in there and they're, plenty of those, they should be, for the most part, pretty happy.
So what do you think's a good pattern, like a good crab for new tires to try? They're kind of an intimidating pattern to start.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just when I was starting, I spent a lot of time with that raghead trying to not do it the way that it should be done, because I was just ending up sticking my fingers with glue everywhere.
Yeah.
And then I finally, after, going down these, like I would cut these little, that sticky back felt out, and I'd try to get the body right. And I'd use those, and I just never was happy with it. So I went back and looked through the way that it's, quote unquote, supposed to be tied again, which was using McFly foam. And I don't know if you ever messed with McFly foam.
I haven't, no.
but it's basically just, this like synthetic, stretchy, foamy stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So you can imagine what that stuff would be like when you get it with a strong volatile adhesive. It just sticks to everything. So the original called for using Zap goo, which is like the thicker stuff of the Zap gels and all that stuff. And then I went and I tried starting using E6000, which is a waterproof industrial strength adhesive, but it's the consistency is a little thicker, and I feel like when it dries just a little bit, it's just more pliable instead of sticky.
Mm-hmm.
But it has enough stick to it to where that McFly foam will get on it, and it's flexible, which is another thing that's super important. If you use something like epoxy or something that gets hard, it can get in the crunchers of a permit's mouth and break it and twist it.
Hmm.
And if that body twists and fouls up that hook point, no fish. It's going to spit it. So using something that's flexible and that's malleable, and like, if it gets in its mouth and crunches on it, it's not, it's going to give and not just break. So figuring all those things out. And that was another problem with the over the counter raghead was they used epoxy and they break, and people would miss fish of a lifetime on it.
You're talking about using all these foams. What's the most like off the wall material you've seen used to tie crabs? It seems like you see all kinds of, there's so many variations. Yeah.
And I'll say that Alec Gerbeck, whenever he developed that Alflexo, using that flex tube was pretty ingenious. I mean, I worked in the music business for years. That flex tubing is literally just stuff you would buy to make snakes with, like to coat.
Coating cables. Yeah,
like
for sure.
Just use it as a cable thing, because it. So I was just like, whoa! I knew exactly what it was, and I also knew that where I could buy it.
Yeah,
and in lots of different colors that I wouldn't necessarily see, at a fly shop, or people that were specifically making it for or repackaging it for fly tying.
So what do you think is the most important part of tying a crab to ensure that it, we talked about how it orients in the water. What do you think is the most important part to make sure that it rides the right way? If you're doing a hookup, whatever you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a lot of that. I'm not smart enough to know if there's some sort of formula for how much weight you need for a certain hook or anything like that.
Sure.
So I tend to always lean on the heavy side to where I know that it's going to do it, but trial and error too. I see that, some folks at times will make things too light, and I'm just like, I tend to lean in the side that there's not really a wrong way to do it, but sometimes there's a better way or a more productive way.
Yeah. Is there a way of like a distributing weight, in the bottom of that fly that you found that, only thing I can really relate it to is throwing crab traps, where you're throwing snares off of gear or something, and those are a lot of the time just the whole bottom of them is a stack of lead,
Yeah. It's there's different things, but I tend to if I'm questioning whether or not it's going to be heavy enough, and I have to tie it on, right up to the eye of the hook, I tend to do a really big thread bump there to get it raised up off that hook.
Okay.
Even further, to give it more weight distributed to the top to where it'll turn.
Cool.
If I'm doing something like a shrimp or a squimp, I can move that eye back further to the bend of the hook at times. With flexos, you can move that eye back to the center of the hook shank.
Yeah, that's something that tripped me out. For someone who ties like a lot of steelhead flies and stuff like that, and I don't fish a lot of salt water yet. Just because of where I live in Sacramento.
Yeah.
That seeing somebody tying crabs and throwing multiple sets of dumbbell eyes on them in different spots and stuff like that was just like, oh man, it's super interesting. Just a little unconventional, a little out of the general wheelhouse for me, you know.
Like on those camo crabs, and there's a few others that I do that I have. I take a tungsten putty, like what you'd use in Pine Box Derby cars back in the day, or maybe still now. That kids
maybe
to make them. But I'll use that and weigh it on a little scale, and then just kind of mold it to make the bottom of the crab.
Okay.
And then I'll use either some like t-shirt paint to make the bottom white, or some sort of resin to make that belly white, and then I can mark it up or do whatever. But
cool.
I think most things in nature that I've seen usually have a white belly.
Right on. Yep. Already passing on a lot of cool tips here, and I'm gonna include a list of tying videos that I found online of crabs that I dig, and kind of include them on the show notes if anybody wants to check those out.
Yeah.
And yeah, I hope to fish more crabs and come out to you're part of the country. And, and check it out
on the bow of my boat anytime, man.
Sweet. So before I interview a guest, I try to do some reading on them and where they're from and stuff, and I always try to look up some kind of like unrelated weird stuff to get my brain going. And so the state of Texas has its share of weird stories, like the Marfa lights. You got a lot of places that people say are haunted: the Alamo, Hotel Galvez, the USS Lexington. And I know it's got nothing to do with fly tying, but I love asking my guests if they have any like paranormal or weird experiences or stories. You've traveled a lot too on the road. I'm interested.
I've been into some places that I've felt really weird. Like there's trying to think of the name of it now, but I think it's somewhere in Kentucky. What the heck was the name of that place?
Is it a hotel or something?
No, it's a venue.
I
want to, I can't remember. Southgate House. Maybe. Yeah, I think it's like Southgate House, but this place is like super, super old, lots of old Civil War stories and stuff like that. But like we stayed late in the night and kind of went poking around in it. And
it felt weird.
I didn't see anything, but like I had, just that weird, uneasy.
Yeah.
Like, man, something doesn't feel right around here.
Crazy.
Freaked me out enough. But yeah, I haven't really experienced a whole lot of that I'm aware of anyway. Paranormal activity.
No. Yeah. I love asking people. You guys, fishing guides tend to do a lot of traveling, spend a lot of time out in kind of remote spots. And it's been in people in the music industry too. You're traveling everywhere, so especially I like asking that stuff. And
that's a great question, man. I think that I'm not necessarily a doubter of paranormal activity, but I just haven't really experienced it.
So following on Instagram, I've seen you be vocal about some clean water causes and other topics. Is there any important info that you want to pass on to anybody who's listening today? Anything current?
I have right now. We're kind of in the. I've been to, I guess 2 weeks ago, I was in Rockport for a meeting. We're kind of dealing with an overharvest of oysters right now.
Okay. And
it's just trying to let people know that, gosh, their oysters are so important.
So you're saying an overharvest of oysters that like the bag limits are too big, or like what's being taken advantage of?
I think it has to do with some mismanagement by Texas Parks and Wildlife.
Okay.
B, so many other oyster fisheries have collapsed. So Apalachicola is one that comes to mind that used to be a pretty prominent.
There's just more traffic coming over.
Yeah. So with some of these other, fisheries closing down, and I mean, the amount of oyster fishermen has just been through the roof. Like I want to say that this past year it's like doubled, and nobody's been paying enough attention to it, I don't think. And it's gotten to the point now where it's like some of these really prolific reefs don't even hardly exist anymore.
The resource in general is in danger at this point.
Yeah, I believe so. I think that this year there was a concentration in kind of one of the smaller bay systems that shouldn't have been there. Like, and you talk to the fishermen, they're just like, well, the reason we were there because these other places are closed down. And it's just like, come on, guys. Like at some point, you gotta police your own industry.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, even if TPWD is not out there monitoring you, at some point, you as the harvester needs to realize that this isn't sustainable. And I think just even like in our community, if I'm out, burning a flat or a shoreline or doing something stupid, odds are there's going to be another guide that's going to be like, dude,
right, call you on it.
Yeah. And I just don't think that there's enough accountability, and it's, there's just different mindsets of that. And the reality of it is that oyster reef does so much it helps with shoreline erosion. It is basically the lungs of the bay. It filters all that water out, or all of the dirty water. And that's why we have such clear water. And not to mention the habitat it is for things that fish eat and fish hang out on,
right.
Birds, like just that whole system. And if it's not there, none of the other stuff's going to be there.
For sure. Is there information on your Instagram or anything like that?
Right now there is a link in it to the TPWD website. There's a thing that you can get on and read about what's going on, and you can either say yay or nay on whether or not we should close it down. I've got it. I'm going to be at the TPWD headquarters, I think on the 23rd or 24th of this month, to go talk to the board. A bunch of us will be there to present, why we think it should be closed.
Cool, man. Well, I admire anyone putting their neck out for stuff like that, and thank you. And and I admire people that start their own business too. And I grew up watching my dad do it, supporting 6 kids, fixing Volvos, and I know it takes a lot of work, whether you're twisting wrenches or flies, whatever it is. So best of luck to you and your family this year. And thank you for taking the time out of your evening to chat about crabs and time flies and stuff with me, dude.
Absolutely, man. I appreciate it.
Right on. Thanks
for having me.
Thanks again to Wes McNew from Onion Creek Fly Company for joining me on the program. Check out onioncreekflycompany.com and pick up some of his saltwater flies next time you're heading to the coast. Thank you for giving this weird podcast a chance. It's probably just going to get weirder from here on out. Show notes are available with each episode to give you some further entertainment and some visuals to go along with the audio. They include a bunch of relevant links you might enjoy or find useful, but you don't have to look at them. That's your choice. I'm not the boss of you, and I never will be. The only thing I'm going to command you to do today is to hug your friends and your family when you see them. You never know when you'll be stupid enough to get into a situation that might kill one of you. I've been reading these short blurbs about 2 organizations that I admire over the last few shows. They don't pay me, and they probably don't know about the show. I hope you check them out, and if you're able to contribute in some way to either of them, that would be cool too. Cast Hope is a nonprofit organization positively impacting kids and their mentors in California and Western Nevada through free fly fishing and outdoor experiences. Through their program, clients build mentoring relationships, fly fishing skills, outdoor knowledge, sustainable practices, and personal values. Cast Hope's gift of the outdoors empowers each mentoring pair to grow closer as they participate in healthy hobbies together. Check them out at casthope.org and whichever social network you like to use. Wild Steelheaders United was established to educate and mobilize the numerous wild steelhead advocates. It's a place where anglers can become more informed about wild steelhead biology and ecology, keep abreast of policy issues, and learn about Trout Unlimited's conservation work. As demonstrated by history, it is certainly possible to rally conservation-minded steelhead anglers to weigh in on specific management decisions that threaten to eliminate something they value. But there is no precedent for advancing a proactive, sustainable policy agenda at scale through purely volunteer efforts. The chances of conservation success are greatest if we have the backing of as many individuals as possible across all the Pacific states. This is why Wild Steelheaders United is critical. Visit wildsteelheaders.org for more info.
Today's episode of the Secret Society of Fly Tyers is brought to you by NothingButTheFacts.com, a website for folks who truly demand nothing but the facts. Do you want the facts? Can you handle the truth? Do your eyes hurt? Mine too. But that doesn't stop me from using my computer to go to NothingButTheFacts.com to learn all sorts of facts that legally cannot be disputed or proved wrong. Try it today. It's free. Or maybe it's not. Who knows? Not me.